Imagine holding a battery that's over 2,000 years old. Now imagine finding a computer from 100 years before Jesus Christ was born. And wait, what if I told you that someone built a working steam engine in ancient Greece, but decided to call it a toy? These aren't science fiction plots. These are real objects sitting in museums right now. And the problem is, they don't fit any timeline we've created. Today, we're uncovering 10 ancient technologies that shouldn't exist. By the time you finish listening, you might never look at history the same way again. Number 1. The Baghdad Battery. Electricity in the Parthian Empire. It begins in 1938 near Baghdad, Iraq. German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig unearths a strange clay jar. Inside, a copper cylinder, an iron rod, and traces of an acidic substance like vinegar or wine. Koenig was stunned because this three-piece setup is identical to a simple galvanic cell, a battery. Dating back to the Parthian period, roughly 250 BC to 224 AD, the jar could produce about 1.1 to 2 volts of electricity. Not much, true, but enough to electroplate gold or silver onto copper. And electroplating was supposedly invented in the 19th century. So why does a 2,200-year-old jar in a Baghdad museum have the exact components needed to generate current? Critics argue no wires were found, but the soil could have corroded them over millennia. Others say maybe it was for religious healing using electric shocks, but whether it was a battery or not, the fact remains someone in ancient Persia understood that mixing certain metals and acids produces an invisible force, a force that would not be officially discovered until 1800 by Alessandro Volta. So, question number 1, did the Parthians have electroplating? And if so, what else did they power with it? Number 2, the Antikythera Mechanism, a Greek computer. Let's jump from Iraq to the waters off Antikythera, a Greek island. In 1901, divers searching for sponges found a shipwreck. Among bronze statues and amphorae, they found a corroded lump of rock and metal. Nobody cared for months, until the lump cracked open. Inside, precision gears, layers of interlocking bronze wheels, teeth so tiny and exact that they could only be made by a master clockmaker. But this ship sank around 70 to 60 BC. That means the device was built earlier, possibly around 100 BC. For decades, no one understood what it was. Then, in 1959, science historian Derek de Sola Price proved it. The Antikythera Mechanism was an analog computer. When you turned a hand crank, gears rotated dials showing the positions of the Sun, Moon, and planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. It predicted solar and lunar eclipses down to the hour. It even tracked the irregular orbit of the moon using a pin and slot gear system that scientists didn't think existed until the 14th century. This single device was more advanced than any known clockwork for the next 1,400 years. Nothing remotely as complex appears again until the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe. So how did the Greeks do it? Was it a one-off genius invention, or was there a whole industry of such computers that simply rusted away? We'll never know. But the Antikythera Mechanism remains a slap in the face to linear history. Number 3. Roman Nanotechnology, the Lycurgus Cup. Next, let's go to London, British Museum. On display, a beautiful Roman glass cup called the Lycurgus Cup. It shows King Lycurgus being trapped by vines. Looks ordinary in normal light, but when light shines through from behind, the cup changes color. It turns from jade green to blood red. That's not paint. That's not a trick of the eye. That's nanotechnology. In 1990, scientists examined the cup under an electron microscope. They found tiny particles of silver and gold, each particle 50 nanometers in diameter, about 1,000 times smaller than a grain of salt. The Romans had mixed gold dust into the glass in such a precise way that the glass became a dichroic filter, scattering light differently depending on the angle. Modern labs can produce nanoparticles today, but we use vacuum chambers, lasers, and chemical vapor deposition. The Romans, in the 4th century AD, somehow did it with crude furnaces and grinding stones. No one knows how. No written recipe survives, and attempts to recreate the cup have failed. It stands alone, a 1,600-year-old object made by technology that shouldn't exist for another 15 centuries. Number 4. The Great Pyramid's Power Plant Theory. You've heard the pyramids, but have you heard this? The Great Pyramid of Giza contains no hieroglyphics. No mummy was ever found inside the king's chamber. So what was it for? Some researchers, like engineer Christopher Dunn, argue the Great Pyramid was not a tomb. It was a machine, a power plant. Let me walk you through the evidence. The pyramid was originally covered in white casing stones, polished limestone that acted like an electrical insulator. The inner passages were lined with granite, which contains quartz crystals. When you squeeze quartz, it generates an electrical charge. It's called the piezoelectric effect. Now look at the shafts. They're angled perfectly to face astronomical bodies, but also they could have conducted infrasonic waves. Groundwater flowing underneath the pyramid through the subterranean chamber could have vibrated the entire structure. That vibration, applied to quartz-rich granite, would generate an electric current, and the so-called air shafts could have been waveguides for microwave energy. It sounds insane, but experiments have shown the pyramid can concentrate electromagnetic energy in its internal chambers. A 2018 Russian study proved that the pyramid shape naturally focuses radio waves. So, if the Egyptians had even basic knowledge of resonance and vibration, could they have produced wireless electricity? We're not saying they lit up light bulbs, but there are strange carvings in Egyptian temples that look like giant light bulbs with filaments. The mainstream calls them lotus flowers. You decide. Number 5. The Unfinished Obelisk. 1,200 tons of rock. Let's stay in Egypt, but travel to Aswan. There, lying in a granite quarry, is the unfinished obelisk. It's 1/3 longer than any obelisk ever erected, 42 meters long, and it would have weighed 1,200 tons. That's about 200 African elephants. Why is it unfinished? A crack appeared in the granite, so the workers abandoned it. But look closely at the surface. You'll see smooth, parallel grooves. According to mainstream theory, workers pounded dolerite balls into the granite to carve it out. But dolerite balls leave rough, uneven marks. These grooves are machine smooth, almost like they were cut by a giant circular saw. Moreover, how would they lift a 1,200-ton stone onto a transport barge? The largest modern cranes struggle with 500 tons, and the ancient Egyptians supposedly did this with wooden sleds and wet sand. The unfinished obelisk is a monument to impossible logistics. It's physical proof that we're missing a huge chapter in the story of ancient stoneworking. Some have suggested high-frequency acoustic vibrations to soften granite. Others say lost plant extracts could temporarily harden or soften stone. Whatever the method, it's gone now. Number 6. Ancient Greek steam engine, the Aeoli pile. Hero of Alexandria lived around 10 to 70 AD. He wrote books on mechanics, pneumatics, and even built a programmable cart. But his most famous invention is the Aeoli pile, a steam engine. Picture this, a hollow metal sphere mounted on 2 hollow tubes. Below it, a cauldron of water. You light a fire. Water boils, steam rises through the tubes into the sphere. 2 bent nozzles on the sphere's surface let steam escape, and because of Newton's third law, action and reaction, the sphere spins fast. Hero demonstrated this device in temples. Priests used it to make statues move or to open temple doors without visible effort. But here's the tragedy. Hero never saw it as more than a toy. Industrial Revolution? He didn't even try. The Aeoli pile was capable of doing work. It could have driven machinery, but Roman society had cheap slave labor, so no one funded steam research. It took another 1,600 years for Thomas Newcomen to build a practical steam engine in 1712. So, the ancient Greeks had the principle of steam power. They had metalworking skills. They had geometry. Why didn't they start an industrial revolution? That question haunts economic historians. Number 7. The Nazca Lines, runways for ancient plains? Deep in the Peruvian desert, the Nazca people etched giant lines into the earth between 500 BC and 500 AD. We're talking about hundreds of figures: a monkey 93 meters long, a hummingbird 100 meters long, a spider 47 meters long. They're so huge that you can only recognize them from the air. So why make drawings that only the gods could see? The mainstream says they were ritual paths for processions. But one hypothesis is wild. The Nazca Lines were runways. Researcher Jim Woodman argued that the Nazca people built hot air balloons. He even built a small replica using only materials available to the Nazca: cotton cloth, a clay furnace, and firewood. It flew. If the Nazca could build balloons, then they could view their own lines from above. That would explain why the figures are perfectly proportioned when seen from the sky. But wait, there's more. Some of the lines are arrow-straight for miles, ending in trapezoidal shapes. These look suspiciously like airport runways, and the soil in those areas is compacted so hard that it could support weight. Of course, no one claims the Nazca had airplanes, but could they have had gliders? Could they have had contact with other cultures who did? Eric von Däniken famously claimed the Nazca Lines were landing strips for alien spacecraft. Most archaeologists reject that, but the mystery remains. Why invest thousands of man-hours into designs no one on the ground could ever see? Number 8. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, 1,600 years without rust. Delhi, India. In the courtyard of the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque, there stands a pillar. It's 7.2 meters tall, weighs about 6.5 tons, and it's 1,600 years old. But here's the incredible part. It has almost no rust. That's impossible. Iron rusts. It's a basic fact of chemistry. But this pillar, made of 98% wrought iron, has survived 16 centuries of Delhi's monsoons, pollution, and humidity. The surface has a thin, passive layer of mesowite, a compound that forms only when iron has very high phosphorus content and is exposed to a specific cycle of wetting and drying. Ancient Indian metallurgists didn't know about mesowite, but they accidentally stumbled upon a perfect recipe. The pillar was forged using a technique of hammering hot iron without slag removal, which created a protective coating. The result? A marvel of corrosion resistance that modern science still struggles to replicate on such a large scale. If you touch the pillar today, you'll see no rust flakes on your hands. It feels like polished stone. This single pillar proves that ancient India possessed advanced metallurgical knowledge that we only rediscovered in the 20th century. Number 9. The Sampool Carpets, cross-dressing across cultures. This one is less about machines, but equally baffling. In 1983, archaeologists found a cemetery in Sampool, Xinjiang, China. Among the mummies, they discovered woolen tapestries from roughly 300 to 500 BC. On one tapestry is the face of a Greek soldier. He has curly hair, a Mediterranean nose, and a centaur fighting a Greek warrior. But here's the shock. That Greek soldier is wearing a Chinese-style robe, and his trousers are Central Asian. How did a Greek soldier end up on a Chinese tapestry hundreds of years before Alexander the Great's empire reached that far? Did Greeks travel to Xinjiang in the 4th century BC? Or did the image travel through trade routes, being copied and adapted by local weavers who had never seen a real Greek? The Sampool tapestries show that globalization isn't new. Thousands of years ago, ideas, images, and technologies were crossing continents. But the speed of that exchange puzzles historians. The tapestry suggests that Greek art influenced Central Asia at a time when we thought the two regions were completely isolated. Number 10. The Coso artifact, a spark plug in a geode? We end with a controversial one. In 1961, three friends were rock hunting near Olancha, California. They cracked open a geode, a hard rock that usually contains crystals inside. But inside this geode, they found something else, a ceramic cylinder with a metal core. It looked exactly like a spark plug. The geode was dated to around 500,000 years old, but spark plugs were invented in the 19th century. So how did a modern spark plug end up inside a half-million-year-old rock? Skeptics say the object was simply a spark plug from the 1920s that became encrusted with iron oxides over a few decades, fooling the finders. But the finders insisted the geode had been completely sealed, with no cracks or signs of tampering. The artifact, called the Coso artifact, has since disappeared. No scientific analysis was ever published. So is the Coso artifact proof of an advanced prehistoric civilization or just an elaborate hoax? We'll likely never know, but it remains one of the most tantalizing out-of-place artifacts ever found.